So once we kind of have a 3D view set, all right, let's say this is great, all right, awesome, everything. All right, next thing you're going to want to do is get into actually running a rendering, okay? So before we get into the process, is one of the first things you're going to want to do is, make sure that you have all of your materials set. Now, I know we've kind of breezed over, in the past weeks, customizing materials and everything like that. All right, so we'll take a quick run through all of your materials and the different settings that you have for each of them. All right, so if we go to our floor plan, okay, and let's say we start, and we'll say this exterior wall here, right? Let's go into the settings of it, type settings. All right, let's go with the outside finish layers, all right, because that's basically what we're going to see when we run our rendering. All right, so we have brick common. Okay, if we click on that, all right, it brings us to our material browser, all right, which we've seen before. We've been talking about how we can scroll down here, right, and select the material. Okay, but you probably notice on a number of different occasions is you probably don't have the material here that you're looking for, right? What you can do with Revit and the material browser, all right, is you can create new materials, all right, as well as duplicate new materials, okay? And now the reason why we have the option to duplicate materials as well, right, is because these fall under the same type of category as the walls do or the floors or anything like that, right? So if you make any changes to the materials here, all right, let's say the brick common, we make any of the changes to the graphics or the appearance or anything like that, all right, if we make any changes here, it's going to affect every single object, all right, and every single layer that uses this brick common material, right? So even though we have the wall selected and we want to change the brick on this exact wall, all right, is you have to think of, is there anywhere else in this whole project, right, that has this brick used on as a layer, right? So if you have a floor or a walkway, let's say for example, that uses the same brick, right, even though you change it here for your wall, it's going to affect the look on that walkway or the floor itself as well. All right, so kind of keep that in mind when you're making changes. Right, but if you wanted to make a new material or you wanted to go ahead and duplicate, right, if you use the drop down here at the very bottom, you can see create new or duplicate selected. Okay, but let's just say we wanted to duplicate this brick. All right, let's say duplicate selected, and that's fine. We won't name it anything special. It'll just be kind of the default name there. All right, so with that selected now, all right, so that way I don't screw around with my original brick. All right, let's go over to the right here with the different tabs. Okay, so we talked about briefly with identity, all right, because we were talking about schedules, all right, and all the material parameters. All right, so this is basically just the data that goes into the material itself. So if you were doing brick, all right, manufacturer and model, maybe it's Spalding brick, maybe it's a different brick manufacturer, you might want to put that stuff in. All right, you might want to fill in something like the cost, anything like that, right? Again, this is just going to be data, so unless you're going to be using this stuff in schedule or anything like that, you might not have to fill anything out for it. All right. But what you will want to do is under class here, all right, make sure that this is set correctly to whatever your material is. All right, so whether it's brick, all right, whether it's glass, anything like that, make sure that you select the correct class of material. All right, because basically the class that you select here will have a bearing on different options that you have, all right, under these other tabs to the right. Okay, so make sure that you select the correct class. Right, in this case, brick is masonry, so we're going to leave it there. But you can see you have carpet, ceramic, concrete, earth, so on and so forth. All right. So identity tab under name. All right, you can rename your material. All right, but this is basically just all the data. Now the graphics tab and appearance tab, all right, are basically going to be determining how this material shows itself. Right, and now for some of the materials that you're going to use, let's say for example, the metal stud layer, all right, you're never actually going to physically see that in your model, all right, because it's the layer that's sandwiched in between everything, right? So you're never going to actually see that. So you probably never have to worry about filling in the graphics tab or the appearance tab, right? Because you're never actually going to see it unless you cut it in a section, all right, in which case under graphics you can see what the cut pattern is, all right? But aside from that, shading and kind of surface patterns, right, you're really not going to have to worry about those, okay? But the graphics tab, right, the settings under here are going to define how your material looks in any of your 2D plans or any of your 3D plans, all right, when you have kind of the hidden lines, all right, or any of your shaded view settings down here, right, or the consistent colors, right? So for instance, shading, this will tell Revit what color you want to show up as the shading, all right, when you change it to consistent colors or anything like that. All right, surface pattern, we talked about this briefly as well, is this will show an actual surface pattern on the object, all right, as for that material. All right, so you can click on the pattern, the color of it, all right. The cut pattern, right, so when this material gets cut in section, right, what's the hatch pattern that shows up, right? So again, you can change this ahead of time so that when this material gets cut in a wall section, right, you won't have to kind of go back after the fact and then fill in that material layer in your wall detail with the appropriate hatch pattern, right? It automatically does it for you. Okay. Now, the Appearance tab, all right, the Appearance tab only has to do with rendering, okay? So the Appearance tab is basically going to be your kind of lifelike image, all right, and what it's actually going to look like. So either when you run a rendering or if you change the visual style for your view to realistic, all right, it'll kind of give you a quick view of what the rendering is going to look like, okay? But if you look here under Appearance tab, all right, is basically this is what's called one of your assets, all right? This is your appearance asset for your material, okay? Now you'll see here that under Appearance, non-uniform running burgundy, right, happens to be the asset that you selected here. Okay, if you drop these tabs underneath it, right, information, masonry, relief pattern, intent, right, these drop downs here are specific to the masonry materials, right, so the masonry class. If you go into a metal one, all right, or a glass material, right, you're going to have different drop downs for those, all right, so that's why it's important to make sure that you select the correct class for your material. That way you have the appropriate options here, okay. But under information, you can see, you know, things such as typical name, description, all right. In this case, under masonry, it has, you know, your type, masonry or CMU, all right, where it says image here, right? So this is going to be the actual physical image that Revit is going to render onto the surface, okay? The way that Revit runs its rendering, as well as a lot of different rendering programs, right? It basically takes an image and it kind of stitches itself side by side all the way across the surface, all right, to create kind of a repeating pattern on that surface and to create the lifelike effect, all right? So the image here is essentially, in this case, you can see it underneath is the PNG file, all right? Now, if for some reason you wanted to change, you know, the look of this particular brick, all right, you can select the image here, all right, you can see that it's there. If you scroll down, you can see you can add things like tint color, right? We're not going to get into the deep details of map channel and UVW source and all of these settings, right? But if you want to go through all of them and change those specifically, you can, right? But basically, this is just changing the scale of everything, all right, of this image itself, okay, to make sure that that's scaled correctly. So when that Revit renders it, you know, it looks like life-size brick, okay? Just underneath it here, if you click on the file name, you can change out that actual image file, right? And we'll talk in a second about how, you know, you can swap out the image files themselves, all right? In this case, for masonry, you have the finish of the actual brick itself, okay? What's interesting is for this one here, if you drop down relief pattern, all right, you have the image for that as well. So basically the relief or the kind of, you know, 3D imagery that you're going for here makes it look like it's actually in 3D and not just a 2D image on there. Okay, and then obviously underneath that is tint if you wanted to add some tint to your brick, okay? But before we go through and change any of these here, is if you wanted to go and select a different type of brick, right? And before you go and create a custom one with your own image file, right? If you go and click on this button here, right, which is replace this asset, the one just to the right is duplicate, right? So you're going to want to make sure that if for some reason you're making changes to this particular one, that you duplicate it, all right? So it's just like all the other things is make sure that you duplicate the asset type. All right, but if you click on replace this asset, right, it'll bring you up to the right here, the asset browser. Okay. Now in here, right, is Revit has a whole host of different assets that it already has set up. All right, so we just kind of make the window a little bit larger. All right, adjust these columns so you can read them a little bit better. All right, so you can see we have a, in my case is when I installed this Revit, it brought in all the material libraries. All right, which is what you're going to want to do when you install Revit. All right, make sure you bring material libraries with you. Okay, but you can see Autodesk physical assets. You have the appearance library. You also have all of these underneath it, right, to select from. But in all of these, as you can see, you can scroll down. All right, all the different categories. You have everything from paint colors to different wood materials to anything. So if you wanted to say you wanted a brick, right? So if I typed in brick up here in search, okay, it's going to search through. These are all the different types of brick that Revit has already created, right? So you have everything from Adobe, right? Herringbone, modular brick, non-uniform, running, red, gray, different colors, okay? So you can see you have a whole host of different brick to choose from, right? You can see that was just under Autodesk physical assets. If you click on the other, right, you can see you have a whole host of different ones under here as well. All right, so you have a bunch of different types of brick to choose from, right? And if you wanted to do not only brick, look up anything else. Let's say metal, all right? Now you have all these different types of metal here, all right? All the different types of finishes, different colors, everything like that, all right? So before you go and start making custom colors, I'd look through the asset browser to see if there's anything that you can find first, all right? Just to change it out, all right, before you start to make anything custom. So similar to the way the families are, all right, and how I mentioned the families. Okay. So in this case, so the 12-inch non-uniform, all right, if I wanted to switch to either this one here, let's say I wanted to swap this out, right, for gray, right? This one happens to be non-uniform running burgundy. All right, let's swap this out and say gray. Double click or click on the little arrows here, right? And on the left, you can see, okay, Revit's swapped that out. We now look and say, okay, we have all the information here on the left, right? And if that's the asset you want, you can X this out and go along your way and adjust this here, all right? Let me change that back, I think. That one works. That was the one I had originally. Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and we'll just keep it as that one. All right. And we'll go ahead and X that out. All right, and so that's how you can go ahead and switch the asset itself. All right, whether it's brick, again, metal, anything like that. All right, or if, for instance, we were talking about grass, but we don't have grass here. All right, on the left, as you can do something either by clicking and creating a new material itself, or if you go to, I believe it's under earth, right? If you went and you duplicated your earth, all right, and you came in here, you typed in grass, right? You can see you have a whole bunch of different grass styles you have in here as well. All right. So just remember, there's a whole host of different things that you can choose from. All right, and so that's a way you can kind of duplicate and create yourself new materials. Okay. Now, if we go back up here to brick where I was going originally, just cancel that. Come back to brick common. Okay. So our brick common. All right, under the appearance tab. So let's say we needed to go and create kind of a whole new material for ourselves, right? Either we duplicated the material or the asset here isn't working, right? We wanted to create a very custom rendering for it, all right? Is you'll notice when you click here on the image that this is kind of perfectly set up where, when this repeats side by side and kind of stitches itself together, it's going to look perfectly even with each other, and you're not going to notice a difference of where that image actually splices itself together. All right, and that's kind of the key when you're selecting images to render. All right, is if you're going to create a custom material for yourself, and you're going to create a custom kind of image, all right, is kind of choose that as, when things like this get rendered is, generally speaking, is it's easier to select images that are easily repeatable. All right, so that way if you need to Photoshop this out and kind of chop it into a space um, or into a shape, all right, that will look fine when it repeats itself. All right, so if you think about it as Revit will go and paste this onto the wall, right, and when it gets to the right of it, it'll basically copy this image again, right? So when it copies it left to right, is this left edge has to kind of meet up nicely with this right edge, because when it copies itself over here, all right, it has to look kind of fluid and like it belongs and it's supposed to go along, all right? Same with the top and the bottom. So when you're looking for a custom image, make sure that you kind of keep that in mind, okay? And if it is an object or a material, right, that's going to kind of require some sort of a 3D look to it, right? In this case, like the brick, all right, is you may have something like a relief pattern, or you may have sometimes instead of relief pattern, it'll be called a bump, okay? And essentially the easiest way to do that is whatever image you create for the actual rendering appearance, all right, is usually what you'll do for the bump is you'll make a copy of that image, and in Photoshop or whatever you're using, all right, is you'll make a copy, and in that copy is you desaturate the entire image, all right, so basically turn it black and white, and then usually is, crank up the contrast a little bit, so that way the darks come out a little more and the lights stay a little bit lighter, right? Basically what that's going to do is you'll set it there for your relief pattern, and that will tell Revit, based on the dark areas and light areas, what areas are supposed to stand out and kind of look 3D. So when you actually run this rendering, it'll look like the brick actually sticks out from the building. All right. But again, without walking through individually, how to create this image, because again, we could do that, but it would take quite a bit of time. All right. But I would recommend, if you're going to go to that extent, there's a number of different videos online, as well as books that you can look at just on rendering alone. All right. Okay, but essentially with your materials, all right, that's what you're going to get under your appearance tab. All right, so that's going to be your image when you look at it when you render. All right, what's also nice is if you're thinking of swapping out or changing one of these assets, all right, and you don't know, well, you know what, if I change this material, how many other things is it going to affect? All right, what's nice under the appearance tab with these assets, if just to the left of the title here, this little number, this will tell you how many other materials are using this same asset. All right, so if this brick common, all right, is using this non-uniform running burgundy asset, if the brick soldier course just underneath it happened to be using that same asset, all right, is you would see a 1. So it would tell you that there's one other material other than the one you're in that's actually using that asset. All right, so it's kind of nice to look at and see and say, oh, okay, if I don't want to change this because it's actually going to affect more than just this material. All right. The next two tabs, physical and thermal, all right, you don't need to fill in unless you're actually doing some analysis with it. So you have physical, all right, you can swap these assets out as well, right, just like your appearance. But you can see brick common underneath the information, all right. If you drop down the mechanical here, you can see it's stuff like density, right? So use it for energy analysis, use it for structural analysis, things like that, all right? And the same with thermal. Okay, these are going to be thermal properties of whatever material you're doing. And again, if you're not going to use it for analysis, you don't really have to add that in there either. Okay, but those are those two other tabs here. Right, but for the most part, the tabs you're going to probably be concerned with are the graphics and the appearance tabs. Okay, so I would recommend going through, and if you're going to do some customized materials, is kind of become familiar with the appearance tab here and the graphics tab. All right, and under the graphics tab for shading, if you click on the checkbox for use render appearance, it basically just selects a color that's similar to whatever is shown here in your image. All right, doesn't always do anything good, but again, it kind of gets it close to whatever that render image is. All right, so when you're looking at it in a a consistent colors or a shaded view. Okay.